Welcome to lecture number 23rd of the series Unreal Engine 5.1.1 for Archviz, and in today's lecture we'll learn how you can create new materials and you'll learn how you can use different textures in your materials in Unreal Engine. Okay, so let's get started. First of all, I'll add a few more effects in my scene. Let me first drag this sun sky and I'll press W on my keyboard to view this gizmo. Okay, let's move this on y-axis. By the way, if you're wondering that how am I moving my camera view with my gizmo, I'm doing so by holding shift on my keyboard and then just using my left mouse button to drag this along my camera view. Okay, yeah, so let's pull it up. Okay, one more thing, you can use E key on your keyboard to rotate something, to rotate any mesh. Okay, and you can use R key to scale it up or scale it down. Okay, you can also use your mouse cursor to use all of these. W key to select and translate objects, select and rotate objects, and select and scale objects. Okay, yeah, so let's add a visual effect. I'll go into my visual effects and let's add volumetric cloud. Now this volumetric cloud allows me to make some very nice dynamic clouds that are moving in a certain direction. Okay, if I hide this volumetric cloud, you can see that we don't have those clouds. Our sky is just empty. Let's unhide this. Let's move it and place it right here near this sun sky. Now you can see that below this horizon we have nothing. It is just point blank. It is just empty. Okay, so let's bring in another visual effect, and this one will be exponential height fog. Now as you can see that we can use this exponential height fog to have something in our scene below this horizon. Yeah, so let's put it right here. Let's bring in another effect. I'll go into visual effects and I'll bring in post-process volume. Now this post-process volume might just look like a simple cube, but it will control all of the dynamics of our scene. If I select this post-process volume and go into the details panel, you can see that we can control bloom, exposure, we can control the depth of field of our scene, we can control the temperature, we can do some color grading. So we're going to control all of our dynamics of our scene through this post-process volume. Okay, yeah, for example, let me first scale this up. I'll press R on my keyboard and I'll scale it up. Let's bring this up. Okay, yeah, for example, let's say if I want to increase the exposure of my scene, what I will do is I'll go into this exposure option, I'll check these two boxes and I'll simply increase my exposure. Now you may notice that this increase of exposure does not have any effect on our scene, and this is because for now by default settings every change that we make in post process volume is confined inside this cube, inside the area of this cube. So if I go inside this cube, now you will observe some change in exposure. Okay, now if I decrease my exposure, you'll notice some decrease in my exposure, and if I increase it, it will increase my exposure of the scene. But as soon as I come out of this cube, now you can see that this change in exposure is not affecting our scene anymore, and this is because by default all of our changes are confined within the area of this cube. So either you can scale this up and cover our entire scene, or what you can do is search for infinite, extend, unbound. I'll check this box. Now when I check this box, all of the settings that we do in our post process volume will not be confined to the area of this cube. In fact, now it will affect our entire scene. Okay, now if I reduce my exposure, as you can see that our exposure now is much lower. And if I increase my exposure, our scene will become brighter and brighter and brighter. Okay. Yeah. So regardless the size of this cube, as long as our infinite extend unbound option is checked, it will affect our entire scene. Okay. Now you may notice something, that when I go into my living room, Unreal Engine automatically increases our exposure just way too much. Okay. It is automatically changing our exposure. It is not taking this value into account. And this is because we have set our metering mode to automatic exposure histogram. Let's change this to manual, and now it will take this value into account. Let me decrease my exposure. Let's move out of this room, and I'll decrease my exposure. And when I move into this living room, we need to increase this exposure. Okay. Yeah. But let's just keep it at this value, and let's hide this roof mesh, and I'll select my post process volume, and I'll decrease my exposure. Let me select my sun sky, and by using these latitude and longitude values, I can move the direction of the light from my sun. Let's now increase our exposure. If you notice that your camera movement is just uncontrollably too fast, what you can do is go into this camera speed option and just decrease it to 2 or 3. Yeah, now my camera is much slower and controllable. Let's now learn how you can create new materials inside Unreal Engine. I'll go into my content folder, and let's create a new folder. I'll rename this folder as materials. And by using my left mouse button on my content drawer, I can add a new material. And when I go into this material, we have our material editor, and this is our main material node, to which we will connect different types of nodes: basic color, specular, roughness, metallic. It pretty much looks like the Blender's principal shader as well. Okay, so to add a base color node, what you need to do is press right mouse button on your material editor layout and type in constant 3 vector, XYZ or RGB, and I'll connect this node with my base color. And to change the base color of my material, you can double click on this black color patch, or what you can also do is click on this black colored patch. I'll press OK. Now to change the specular and roughness values, what you can do is I'll press right mouse button on my material editor layout, and I'll type in constant vector, and I'll connect this node with my roughness. And by changing the value of this box, or you can also change your values in here as well, you can control your roughness. Now to control your specular, you can go into your search bar and type in constant, or what you can also do is just press this box, and I'll press Ctrl D on my keyboard to create a copy, and I'll just connect this node with my specular node. Now you can use these two values to control your specular and your roughness. For now, let's increase this roughness value to 1 and I'll reduce my specular to 0 and I'll apply my material. Make sure you apply your material every time you make some changes in your material editor layout. Otherwise, it will not register your change. Okay. So let's apply this material to my bookshelf. I'll apply this material to this static mesh. And as you can see that now our static mesh is colored in blue. Let's say if I want to change my color, I'll change my color to green. I'll press OK and I'll apply my material. And now our color will be changed. Okay. If I want to change my roughness or specular values, let's decrease this to 0 and increase this to 1. Let's apply our changes. And now as you can see that we have roughness set to 0 and specular set to 1 as indicated by this shiny face. Okay. Now you can always select your material and go into your material editor layout and change your color or tweak some values. But this change is not real time. Every time you make a change, you have to apply that change and then you will able to see that change in your scene. So to make this change real time, what you need to do is let's maximize our window. I'll select my base color node, my constant tree vector, and I'll press right mouse button and convert this to parameter. And I'll rename this parameter as base color. Similarly, I'll select my constant vector and convert this to parameter and rename this as specular. Let's select our roughness node, convert this to parameter, and let's rename this as roughness. Let's apply these changes. And I'll press right mouse button over my new material and I'll create a material instance. And now I'll apply this material to this static mesh. So now if I want to change the color of my material or I want to tweak some specular or roughness values, what you need to do is I'll select my material instance and now I'll use these values to change my parameters in real time. Okay. For example, if I want to change the color of my material, I'll select my base color and you can change your material in real time. Yeah, I'll press OK. Similarly, if I want to tweak my roughness or specular values, what you can do is just increase this value by using the slider. You can use the values between 0 to 1, or you can set your value more than 1, but it will not affect your material because the range of your roughness and specular values is from 0 to 1. Let's set this to 0, or you can set this to 0.5. Okay, so we've learned how you can create a new material and a new material instance to change your material parameters in real time. Now let's learn how you can use textures into our materials. Okay, I'll go into my content folder and let's create a new folder. I'll rename this as textures. And let's create a new folder and I'll rename this texture as fabric texture. Let's go into this folder and we'll download a free texture from Polyheaven website. I'll go into this fabric option and let's download this texture. Okay, 4K is more than enough. Let's just download this. I'll extract my textures and let's go into this textures folder. I'll select all of my textures, normal, roughness and base color, and I'll select all of them and I'll drag all of them into my Unreal Engine content drawer. Let's create a new material. I'll rename this material as cushion. I'll go into this material, and now we have opened our material editor layout. To bring in textures into this material, what you can do is I'll select all of my textures and I'll drag and drop them into my material editor layout. Now, if you're downloading your materials from any external website or any external source, what you need to do is I'll go into my base textures and I'll make sure that this sRGB option is checked. Okay, I'll save this. Let's go into my normal texture. Make sure that this sRGB option is unchecked. Okay, and you need to make sure that your compression settings is set to normal map. I'll go into my reference texture, make sure this sRGB is unchecked, and I'll change my compression settings to mask. Okay, now let's go into our material. I'll select my base texture and change this to virtual color. I'll select my reference texture and change this to virtual mask. I'll select my normal texture and change this to virtual normal. Okay, now let's connect these nodes. I'll connect my base texture with base color, my roughness texture with my roughness node, and my normal texture with my normal node. Okay, and let's apply it. Now let's add this material onto this cushion. Now, as you can see that we have successfully downloaded a texture from external website and used that texture in my material inside Unreal Engine. But this texture appears to be way too scaled up. So we need to tile this down. To tile this down, what we can do is I'll go into my materials and let's search for texture coordinates. Yeah. And let's bring in multiply node. And let's bring in a constant. By the way, you can also bring in this constant by holding 1 on your horizontal numeric keys on your keyboard and press left mouse button. 1 on your horizontal numerical keys and left mouse button. Okay, and I'll connect this node with B and my texture coordinate node with A, and I'll connect my multiply node with all of these textures. Our texture will disappear because we have set this value to 0. Let's set this value to 1. Let's apply it. Yeah, okay. Let's change this value to 3. So as you can see that we have successfully added a texture onto this cushion. Okay, you can also convert this value into parameter. What you can do is I'll press right mouse button and convert this to parameter and rename this as texture coordinates, or I'll just rename this as tile size. I'll save this. And let's create a material instance. Let's drag this material instance onto this cushion. And now I can tweak the tile size by changing this value in my material instance. So yes, Now we're not going to use these textures in our objects, okay? In fact, what we'll do is we'll download free pre-made materials from Megascan's library. It contains thousands of free assets that you can use in your scene, okay? So let's now go into this parent material. Now, if you want to control the intensity of these textures, what you can do is let's bring in multiply node, and you can connect this RGB node with A, and by holding 1 on my keyboard, I'll bring in constant, and I'll connect this node with B, and I'll connect this node with my base color. I'll convert this one to parameter. I'll rename this as base texture intensity. Now by using this value, you can control the intensity of your base texture. Similarly, I'll select these two. I'll press Ctrl D on my keyboard, bring them in, and I'll connect this node with roughness, and I'll connect this RGB node with A. Let's rename this as roughness. And now to control the normal, what you need to is let's bring in a node of flatten normals, and I'll connect this RGB node with this one, and let's bring in a constant one vector and rename this as normal intensity, and I'll connect this node with flatness and this node with my normal node. Okay, yeah. Now if I save this, and go into my material instance, check these boxes, and right now our base texture is point blank, and this is because we have set the base texture intensity to 0. Let's increase this to 1. Okay, and if I continue to increase this, it will change the intensity of my base texture. Similarly, if you want to control the roughness, you can use this slider. Similarly, you can control your tile size, of course, and your normal intensity. Now to confine these values into 0 and 1, what you can do is let's go in parent material. I'll select this roughness node, and let's set this slider max to 1. Similarly, I'll select my normal intensity and set slider max to 1 and apply it. Now you can only keep your values in between 0 and 1. Okay. Now let's say you want to add and control the tint of this texture. So to control the tint of this texture, what you can do is let's go into your paint material, and let's add a multiply node. By the way, you can also add your multiply node by holding M on your keyboard and press your left mouse button. Yeah, okay. Let's bring in constant 3 vector. You can also bring your constant 3 vector by holding 3 on your keyboard on your horizontal numerical keys and press left mouse button. 3 on your keyboard and left mouse button. I'll connect this node with A, and connect this node with B, and connect this node with my base color. Now let's convert this to parameter, and I'll rename this as tint. Yeah, okay. Let's go into the material instance, and right now as you can see that by default it is white, and to add a tint you can change your color and add a different feel to your texture. Let's change this to. Okay, so in today's lecture, we learned how to create new materials and new material instances, and how you can use external textures inside Unreal Engine in your materials. So that's it for this lecture. In the next lecture, we'll download free pre-made materials from Megascan's library and then use them in our scene. Okay, so I'll see you guys in the next lecture.